Today, we're cracking open what are basically the two most important books in all of mental health. Think of them as the rulebooks of the mind, the guides that define everything from anxiety to depression. They literally shape how people get diagnosed, what treatments they get, and even how insurance pays for it all. So let's get into it.
I mean, think about it for a second. We all feel sad sometimes, right? But where is the line between that normal, everyday sadness and what a doctor would call clinical depression? Or what's the difference between just being a little shy and having a full-blown social anxiety disorder? That is the fundamental problem these classification systems are trying to solve.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to tackle why we even need these labels in the first place. Then, we'll get to know America's go-to manual, the DSM-5, and its global counterpart, the ICD. We'll put them head-to-head to see what's actually different, and then we'll wrap up by looking at their real-world impact, the good, the bad, and the complicated.
Okay, so let's start with the big question. Why bother with labels at all? Well, the simple answer is that you can't really treat something if you don't have a shared agreement on what that something even is. We need a common language. So let's get a clear definition on the table. A psychological disorder isn't just a bad day or a funky mood. We're talking about a persistent condition that causes real distress, or one that actually gets in the way of you being able to function in your daily life. Making that distinction is absolutely the first, most crucial step. And this is exactly why these manuals are so incredibly important. They create that common language. Without them, what one doctor calls depression could be totally different from what another doctor calls it. You need that consistency. It's the foundation for pretty much all effective treatment and all meaningful research. All right, let's meet our first major rulebook, the DSM-5. A good way to think about this one is as a highly detailed specialist's guide, used mainly by mental health professionals right here in the United States. Now, the DSM comes from the American Psychiatric Association, and that is a really, really key detail, because even though it's known and used around the world, its DNA is fundamentally American. And you'll want to keep that in the back of your mind because it explains a lot about how it's built and, as we'll see later, some of the criticisms against it. So let's peek under the hood. The DSM-5 is way more than just a simple checklist of disorders. Yeah, it starts with these specific categories, but then it adds all these layers of nuance. It has what are called dimensional assessments, which let clinicians rate how severe the symptoms are, like on a scale. It also recognizes that, symptoms can overlap between different disorders. And super importantly, it now includes a guide for doctors to better understand a person's cultural background. Okay, now for player number 2, the ICD. If the DSM is the specialist's guide, you can think of the ICD as the entire world's health encyclopedia. It's huge. And that really gets to the heart of the ICD's purpose. It's put out by the World Health Organization, and its scope is just massive. It's not just for mental health. It's the system for tracking statistics for every disease you can think of, from the common flu to cancer to schizophrenia, all across the globe. So, naturally, its features are built for that worldwide scale. It is the international standard for tracking health data and for billing insurance. Because it covers the whole shebang, physical and mental, it's really holistic. It uses this alphanumeric code system, which is perfect for crunching big data. And there's a real effort to make it as culturally sensitive and globally applicable as possible. All right, so we've met the two heavyweights. Now let's really put them side by side. This table really nails the main differences. Just look at the scope. The DSM is laser-focused on mental health, which is why it's so detailed for therapists. The ICD, on the other hand, has to cover everything, so it's a bit more streamlined for tracking big-picture health trends. And that difference also explains their structure. The DSM has these super detailed criteria for deep clinical work, while the ICD's codes are designed to be easily used by any health system anywhere, for things like billing and stats. So, why does any of this matter to you and me? Well, because a diagnosis is never just a label in a book. It has this huge, profound impact on people's real lives, which brings us to our final section. On one side of the coin, these systems are absolutely 100% critical. They give us that common language we've been talking about, they make sure diagnoses are consistent, and they help guide treatment plans. They're essential for researchers to spot trends and develop better therapies. And, let's be real, on a very practical level, you almost always need that diagnosis code to get your insurance to cover your care. But it is not a perfect system, not by a long shot. Both manuals get some serious criticism. There's a real concern they can pathologize normal human stuff, like grief after a loss. And since they were developed mostly in Western cultures, there's the whole question of cultural bias. Putting people into these neat little boxes might not reflect the reality that mental health is more of a spectrum. And of course, a label can come with a pretty heavy social stigma.
Now, it's really important to remember that these books are not carved in stone. They're living documents. The whole field of mental health is constantly learning and evolving, and there's a very clear shift away from a one-size-fits-all model and towards something way more personalized. So, what's that future going to look like? Well, for starters, it means moving away from those rigid boxes and thinking more in terms of spectrums, recognizing all the gray area. It also means taking a much more holistic look at a person, bringing in biological info like genetics, along with their unique personal history and environment. The ultimate goal is something called precision psychiatry, where your treatment plan isn't based on a broad label, but is tailored specifically to you. And all of this leads to one final, kind of mind-blowing question. We started this whole conversation asking why we need labels. But as our science gets better and our understanding of the brain gets deeper, could we get to a point where we don't need them at all? Or we see each person not as a diagnosis, but as a completely unique individual profile? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.